Hey, this video is going to hopefully help connect some of the dots of the Collective Church NWA. One of the things that I've seen is that because of our format, because of the way that we are set up, that there can be some challenges to it. And want to talk about some of that, some of the things that I've seen, some of the things that I've asked questions about, some of the things that, I've talked about with some of you at lunch. Even some of the debrief questions that I've been asking to the different small groups, and not all of them have done it yet. But want to just spend the next couple of weeks just kind of talking through some of this to try to close some of the gaps, to try to help people understand like where we are, what we're doing, where we're going. I don't have all the answers for sure. There's a lot that I'm still trying to figure out, but I think that one of the best questions that I've gotten in a while has been the question of it says authentic community on the website, a website that I've never even really put out there that much, but talked about authentic community a lot. And what is authentic and what is community when you think about the Collective Church? And really, when it comes to the word authentic, I realize that there's a definition that we can get from Webster's or an online dictionary or something like that. But really the idea is that to be authentic, that it's this working to live out God's design in our lives. That authentic for the Collective Church is, working to live out God's design in our lives, that's who we want to be, that when we desire to be authentic, that we are working to live out God's design in our lives. Like what God intends for our lives, we want to be working toward. And then when we do that, we are authentic. The definition of community is really coming from the definition of biblical community that we did in an online series over the course of a couple of weeks last month. And that definition is a unified group of people experiencing life together with a common purpose of connecting to God and to each other. It's a little bit longer, so I'm literally reading it. But a unified group of people experiencing life together with a common purpose of connecting to God and to each other. So if you put that together, the idea is that there's a group of people experiencing life together with this common purpose of connecting to God and to each other that are working to live out God's design for our lives individually, and then working to live out God's design for us as groups and as the church as a whole. So I think it's important that you guys know that, and then as well as just the collective as a whole. The collective is the word collective means to a group of people coming together for a common purpose. I feel like that's the common purpose, is that we are to live out an authentic community. And just a side note, because I haven't done a really good job of explaining this, the logo, the T and the exclamation point and the C, the idea there is that the exclamation point represents excitement, and that we are excited about what has come before and what is still to come. So the idea that it is between two things is that there's an excitement about what God has done and what he is going to do. And the T and the C obviously making up the and collective. So just some things that maybe hopefully help connect some of those dots. And moving to some other stuff is like some of the things that I've heard is that, and these are incredible points, is that because of our format, we meet once a month to come together in a gathering. We meet in groups, and not everyone's gotten involved in a group yet, but we meet in groups once a week. And then we have an online experience that some are able to be on consistently, some have never been able to get on for really good reasons, or some kind of hop in and out as they can. And so it's hard to be like, what does it mean to be connected to the Collective Church as a whole? And like, what does it mean to be connected to the pastor, who is me, if you're not in my small group and you are not you're not able to jump online to even be in an online type of community, and you miss one or two gatherings, then all of a sudden you see me or hear from me once every 3 months, and then you may not be someone that really connects with email, and so you're not even hearing some of that stuff. And so just want you to know that I completely see that is something that's a big challenge, is how do we connect to me And that sounds really weird. And there's a part of me that kind of likes that, that people want to be connected to me, but there's also a part that's likes that people are super connected to each other, and there's not just this like one face of the church. And so I just want to tell you that I'm not sure how to do that better. I know that if you're watching this and you would ever want to go get coffee or go get lunch or brunch or breakfast or something like that, I want to do that as much as possible, but that's not even completely always a reality, or even just a Zoom call or a phone call. I want to be as connected as I can, but I understand that there is a challenge there of feeling connected to the pastor. As far as being connected to the church as a whole, I think that's another great really point of like, I'm connected to my small group, whatever we're going to end up calling them, but I'm not connected. What does that mean to be connected to the whole? And I hope that this next thing that I'm going to walk through kind of gives a little bit of an answer to that. I think I'm still not ready to go, this is the solution for that. I think that I've got to work through that and figure through that. And some of the questions that over the next couple of weeks we'll be kind of talking through, it's not that those have not been thought of. It's not that no one has mentioned those. It's not that I've not thought through them. It's just, hey, how do I do that in a way that, like, for right now, I'm able to put some of my time toward the church, and then also working to kind of complete the other half of what my family needs financially through another part-time job. And so some of it's timing and time. Some of it is just haven't been able to get to it yet, that as we continue to grow and evolve as a church, that we're not there yet, but know that we need to get there. And then some things, it just may not be a good fit for our church, and we've just got to figure that out. But so what makes the Collective a church? Like, I've had several people actually ask me that in the church and then outside of the church, just like, what makes the Collective a church? To answer that, I don't feel like it's an easy answer, to just be real honest with you. I want you to think about any church. Like, some of you may have had experiences with church, and some of you may not have had experiences with church. And I think some of us might go, okay, it's this, this, this. And some of us will be like, well, I don't know about that, but it's this, 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 this. And some of us may say this thing or that thing. And so about 2 months ago, I really worked to try to find that answer. As I was looking in Acts 2, verses 42 through 47, I believe that when we look at the things that it mentions, that when the church was beginning, the things that were devoted to were the apostles' teaching. Now, basically, what they had available to them back then is not necessarily the Bible that you would hold or what you reference, but I mean, they were committed to truth that was being held up as, hey, this is from God. Okay, so they were being held up to this message of hope, to this truth, and I believe that is a mark for us as well. Hey, are we held up to that? Fellowship, hanging out together, that there's this common mindset of being together, that there's unity. A meal, and prayer. I believe that those 4 things that were called out as being devoted to, I believe that those are 4 great evidences of what makes something a church. Now, some of you could go, well, I could do that in my small group and never be a part of a church. That is 100% true. But I would also say, what keeps you from calling that a church? What keeps you from that being a church? If the church is the people, then I think that's the case. We, as even though we're a different format, we are a little bit more formalized as a church, even though we may function differently. And meals are a big thing. Want every small group to always have a meal. Want every gathering to be around a meal. Would love, even for the online experience, after we get done, for people to go eat together. Prayer, I think that's one area that we can grow in as a church, is what prayer really looks like. The idea of communicating and talking to God in a way that is more intimate and more relational and more connective. Fellowship, I believe that the Collective, that we do a great job of that. And then the message of hope, the apostles' teaching, that idea of committed to the truth that God has set aside, that God has set as a standard that we are to learn from. I believe that those things make a church. Now, there are theological, there are historical dialogues that would potentially say this thing or that thing. And I understand that. I'm not a church historian. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in church history. But I believe that Acts 2:42 through 47 kind of gives us this a little bit of an idea. So what makes us a church, I believe, is that we are committed to the message of hope. We are committed to what God has set aside, that we are to learn from and to use as something to be able to walk forward in obedience. I believe the Bible. And now, we don't always do what some people would call Bible study. I think that term can be a little tight in its definition. I think that where I've been stretched is what it looks like to really grow what I take in, like the content I'm taking in. But I also know that there are some places where when I think about my kids, I don't think about wanting them to know a lot more as opposed as I want them to be able to take in and know how to be obedient to Jesus based off what they have learned from the truth of Scripture. That may be memorizing a verse, or it may not be memorizing a verse. It may just knowing the story to the point that you're able to apply it. So I think that's something that we are learning as the collective, is how does this message of hope, this devoted to the apostles' teaching, devoted to the truth that God has set aside, is how are we going to grow in that and learn toward that? And I think it's going to look different, but I think it's going to look where it's going to maybe look this way at some point and this way at some point. And there may be some elements that we don't really institute as a church, but are very much celebrating the fact that people may do that on their own time. So I just feel like message of hope, the apostles' teaching, fellowship, meal, prayer, that makes us a church. I believe that we get to be a church because of that, because we do come together, because we are working toward being in community as we live these things out. You know, you look at the groups, the small groups, I think that, man, devoted to truth, fellowship, meal, prayer, I think the groups do those well. The gatherings, same thing, I think, devoted to truth, even though it may look a little bit different in the way that we share stories or do that. Fellowship, meal, prayer, I think that's the case. Online, all four, I think that we're devoted to, like when we went through the book of James online, obviously there's a devotion to the truth that is there, and even biblical community and some of the other, I believe that we're devoted to the truth that is coming from what God has given us, and the Scripture that He has set aside to be like, hey, this is something that's going to help you know how to move forward in obedience. I believe that the online experience does that, and I believe that there is a different type of fellowship, but I do believe that there's a fellowship there. Prayer and a meal, you know, those are a little bit different, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn how to do those things there. So I believe that all three of these things, you've got the groups, you've got the gatherings, and you've got online, I believe all of them help us be the church. So when are you at the collective? I believe that when you go to your small groups, that is church. I believe that when you're online, that is church, and when you're at the gatherings, that is church. I believe that you can be at church at all three, and then all three together make up who we are at this point in 2021 as the church. I really believe that all three lead to authentic community. I think that all three allow us the opportunity to engage communities to spiritually connect to God and to each other. I think that it is messier than in some contexts. So when I say messier, I mean it's a little bit harder without a building, without a specific city, without a bigger staff to maybe do that. And maybe even the one staff that is on staff, that kind of time as of right now is split between doing the church and then kind of having another part-time job that holds the financial part. So where we are now doesn't mean that that's where we're going to be. I believe that authentic community is always going to be a part. I believe that devoted to truth, fellowship, meal, prayer, I believe all that is always going to be a part. And I believe that they do connect. I think it's a harder connection than when you first look at it. And I'm still kind of, just to be really honest with you, I'm still kind of figuring out how to even explain it. I think that the small groups connect big time. When you're connected to that, you're connected to the heart of who we are as a church. I think that when you're able to do that, the groups are able to experience biblical community, the definition that we talked about. I think they're able to live out the four things that Acts 2 talks about being devoted to. I think we experience biblical community in those groups. I think when the gatherings occur, we're able to celebrate together what God is doing, what he has done, and what he will do. And I think the celebration of that very much connects to what God is doing in the small groups. Now, the lessons aren't usually connected. It's for a lot of our groups, it's the only time that we worship together is when we have the once a month gatherings. And so the fact that there may be some feelings of disconnection makes a ton of sense. Like, I just want to normalize that and validate it. I totally get it. Where I see it connecting is that we're living out biblical community as these small groups, which I believe is the heart and soul of who we are. And then we're getting to celebrate what God is doing individually and then even informally through our groups with what he is doing, has done, and will do. The online one can really be the challenge because, you're like, Chuck, that's really hard. That's I think what I've heard is really in great reasons of, man, it's hard with kids. It's not the easiest time of the day. It's hard to just jump in and jump out. Community is different when you're online. Man, I get all that. I think another great point is like the things that we're talking about there are different than the things that we talk about in our small groups. And I totally see where that can feel disconnected. I know that in my church background and also in being on staff at a church, often what happens in the room on Sunday morning is different than what happens on a Wednesday night or in a discipleship group, or different than what might happen in a Sunday morning small group or a weekly small group. That those series can often be a little bit different. And so I think that it is possible to do that. So I just want you to know that I understand that it can feel disconnected. Where I feel like the online is important is I feel like it's this great opportunity for dialogue, for us to talk through who we're to be as a church. And that doesn't mean that it's not valid for some of that stuff to be in the small groups or at the gatherings, but it's an opportunity for us to hear someone say something for 20 or 25 minutes, and then we get to riff off of it. We get to talk. Not that we're pouring truth in, we're trying to work together to reveal truth. And so I believe that dialogue is important, because when we went through the book of James and we looked at what James was trying to tell the New Testament church, that's incredibly insightful for us. When we looked at biblical community, it's insightful. When we right now going through priesthood of the believers and what that means, I believe it's important. At one point we looked at the real Jesus versus counterfeit Jesus. I believe all of those help us and come up alongside the groups and come up alongside the gatherings to connect. And so I think the small groups are a big part as we live out biblical community. I think the celebration of the gatherings is important. And I think this online piece is this great opportunity to have this dialogue of who we're supposed to be as individuals and as a whole as the church, to come up alongside the gatherings and build those up, and also to come alongside the small groups and build those up. And so I'm not saying that these are the best definitions. I'm not saying that these are like something that goes, I get it, okay? And I'm not trying to answer everything in one 20-minute video. What I do want to do is just begin to let you hear from me more than once a month, and not just in an email sense where you go, okay, I'm at least tracking where his brain is. Now, I have a lot of other questions of why Chuck's brain is only right there. Why isn't Chuck's brain thinking about this? And I just want to say this, man, I want all of just text, calls, emails, lunches. Man, I want to hear everything, but I can't do everything at one time, and I can't process everything at one time, and I can't implement everything at one time. And I may not even agree that it's the right time or that it is the right fit for us as a church. But what I do want to know is that you guys know that you have a voice to help me as we grow who we are. And I believe that that's what we're going to continue to keep doing. That the way that the gatherings are now and the small groups are now doesn't mean that it's going to look that way. Doesn't mean it's not going to look that way online, that it doesn't, that it won't look different or that it may look the same. I believe that where we are right now is a great place as we have built the collective church, slow and small. On purpose, slow and small. That's why we've not done any social media. That's not why we've not put the website out there. That's why we've never had a big invite people to come. And the reason is because we are still in the process of finding or feeling confident in our identity. And man, I'm excited that you guys are a part. I'm excited that you guys are even listening to this. This may raise more questions, or it may The goal is not to sound like I'm not addressing one thing or addressing one thing too much. The goal is just to start here and then to keep working forward as we look at who we're to be as a church, as an authentic community. So listen, those of you who are about to do the debrief stuff, man, I want to hear from you. Those that you have, I'm still working through all of that to try to begin to really think through. And this is where I am today, trying to answer those questions. And I know that we will just continue to begin shaping who we are as a church and as individuals and as groups. And I appreciate you being a part of this journey with us. It has been a weird ride, just to be really honest with you. But I believe that like as we were together last Sunday for the gathering, I didn't have a great week getting excited about it. But once I was there, I was like, man, this may have been one of my favorites, to be honest with you. Just the community and worshiping together and getting to pray together and the Lord's Supper and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to tell you thank you. Feel free to email me, text me, whatever. And my goal is over the next couple of weeks to continue just to kind of talk through where we are as a church and hopefully bring some clarity and help you understand my heart for where we are as a church and who we are. So you have an incredible day, and we will talk to you really soon. Bye.